It is said that on certain nights, Crete does not feel like an island at all. It feels like a drifting altar, quiet, afloat on a dark sea, where the wind is careful with its footsteps, and the moon watches without blinking. Whispers tell us of a hill not far from the northern shore, where olive trees gather in slow circles, and their leaves move like a soft breath. Beneath the silence, the ground holds an old warmth, an ancient memory sealed into stone. And if you walk there in your imagination gently, as though approaching a sacred gate, you begin to sense it, a presence that has been waiting for you, and for no one in particular. Marked by the moon, the hill glows faintly. The air tastes of salt and dust, and somewhere in the distance an unseen tide pulls at the edges of the world. Here where memory fades, a question rises as quietly as incense. What kind of place builds beauty on top of silence? Not far beyond the olive shadows, Knossos waits. It does not announce itself with trumpets or banners. It does not shout its name across time. It lies as ruins do, patient, veiled, half swallowed by earth and years, like a sacred chamber that has learned to keep its secrets by simply remaining still. And so we enter, not as visitors, not as collectors of facts, but as witnesses. We step toward the first glow of the palace, as if stepping into a dream that belonged to someone else long ago. The stones are pale, the air is cool, and every broken edge feels softened by centuries of moonlight. Some believe that the walls once carried oceans inside them. Frescoes, now fragments, still flicker behind the veil of time. Dolphins arcing through painted water, lilies opening like slow stars, saffron petals spilled across plaster as though dawn itself had been ground into color. These were not mere decorations. They were invitations, windows into a world where the sea was sacred, where the living and the divine shared the same breath. And yet, for all its brightness, the palace feels guarded. Not by soldiers, not by gates of iron, but by design. Corridors multiply like thoughts in a sleeping mind, one passage turning into another, one doorway leading to three. You move through space and feel the strange tenderness of confusion, the gentle surrender of not needing to know where you are. The labyrinth, you realize, is not simply a place. It is a sensation, an architecture of drifting. Beneath the silence, rooms appear like half-remembered dreams. Storerooms, cool and deep, sit like vaults for offerings. It is said they once held grain, oil, honey, the slow wealth of an island civilization that understood seasons and survival. Clay jars stand in the imagination like sleeping giants, their bellies once full of golden abundance, their mouths sealed like whispered vows. Pillars rise, red as dried clay, shaped like tree trunks turned to stone. They do not feel strict or harsh. They feel organic, almost alive, as if the palace grew rather than was built, as if it sprouted from the hill, fed by salt air and moonlight, woven upward by hands that believed stone could dream. And then there are the courtyards, open to sky. These are the palace's lungs. Here the wind can enter. Here sunlight can fall. Here the stars can look down without obstruction, as though the building needed a connection to the heavens to remain whole. In forgotten corners of the earth, sacred spaces are often sealed away. But at Knossos, even the hidden places seem to leave a crack for starlight to slip through. Still, something lingers beneath the beauty, a hush that is older than myth, because history, like the sea, does not preserve everything it touches. It takes, it reshapes, it leaves behind what it chooses, sometimes by accident, sometimes by cruelty, sometimes by fire. Earthquakes have always lived near these shores, rolling beneath the island like distant beasts in sleep. Some nights, they say, the ground itself murmurs. And in the long life of Knossos, the earth shook, and the palace trembled, and rooms that once held laughter and ritual became chambers of dust. Then came fire, soft in its beginning, merciless in its end. We do not need to imagine flames as spectacle. Let them be quiet, as all endings truly are. A torch tipping, an oil lamp falling, a curtain of heat moving through corridors like a breath that cannot be taken back. And afterward, the strange gift, clay hardened by destruction, sealed signs pressed into tablets, fragments of record preserved by catastrophe. Some believe that fire turned ordinary life into sacred relic. Yet even relics do not explain themselves. When we stand in the ruins, whether in person or in the mind, we are tempted to fill the silence. We place myths gently into the gaps. We lay stories over broken stone the way one lays a blanket over a sleeping child. We speak of Minos, of tribute, of a monster hidden in the deep. But what if the first secret of the labyrinth was not a creature at all? What if the labyrinth was a decision to hide a civilization inside its own echo? Consider it. A palace that does not end in a single grand hall, but in countless chambers. A world where pathways twist and return, where meaning is carried not by one inscription, but by patterns, spirals, horns, waves, lilies, the constant breath of the sea. Perhaps the labyrinth was built to protect something delicate, a way of living, a sacred rhythm, a knowledge spoken only in ritual. Or perhaps it was built to contain contradictions, beauty beside fear, openness beside concealment, starlight above storerooms, sealed like tombs. Whispers tell us the stones remember footsteps, but not names. We know the palace remains. We know its courtyards still drink sky. We know its painted fragments still shimmer, faintly in the mind like starlight trapped in plaster. But its true voice does not return. It stays behind the veil, buried, crumbled, star-marked, oceanic in its distance, like the hush you hear when a wave retreats and leaves the shore momentarily empty. And so, as we drift toward the end of this chapter, we do not force conclusions. We do not insist on certainty. We simply stand with the ruins, letting them be what they are, a sacred silence shaped into stone. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in full. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And tonight, beneath the moon, on a hill where olive leaves breathe slowly, we listen, not for answers, but for the gentle sound of a civilization dreaming, still hidden within its own labyrinth of time. It is said that some walls do not simply hold up roofs. Some walls hold time itself, pressed into plaster, layered in dust, sealed beneath the patient gaze of the moon. Marked by the moon, we return again to Knossos, not to its grand courtyards first, but to its inward places, to a chamber where the air feels older than breath, to a corridor where silence gathers like incense. And there, where memory fades, a single painted figure waits. A dancer, perhaps, or a priestess, or only the curve of a bull's horn, arched like a crescent moon, glowing faintly through centuries of veil and dust. We approach as though carrying a candle in both hands. The flame does not roar. It trembles. It leans toward the wall as if longing to remember. And in that small circle of light, color survives, not loudly, not clearly, but as a whisper. A blue that once belonged to the sea. A red that once belonged to earth. A pale gold that feels like starlight caught and softened. Beneath the silence, a question rises, gentle and unsettling, like a door that opens inward. Did the Minoans leave messages, or only mirrors? Some believe a fresco is merely an image. But here, the painted surface feels like language without words. It does not command. It suggests. It invites you to drift, as though the wall itself is a tide. We move slowly, room to room, in the way one moves through a dream that refuses to become sharp. Each chamber holds another fragment, another breath of pigment, another echo preserved against disappearance. The sea appears again and again, not only in dolphins and waves, but in the motion of everything. The curve of a line, the softness of a spiral, the gentle rhythm that repeats like prayers spoken under breath. Lilies bloom on plaster the way they bloom in the mind when sleep begins to arrive, soft, weightless, celestial. They do not feel like ornament. They feel like an offering, like a signature left by hands that understood beauty as a form of devotion. And then, between these floating symbols, there is the bull, not as a monster, not as a threat, but as motion itself, charged, sacred, and untamed. In the painted leap of the bull, there is an oath to the gods of movement. The body arcs. The moment suspends. The wall remembers the instant before landing, the instant where gravity becomes something you can negotiate with. It is said that in such leaps, the Minoans touch the boundary between human and divine, not to conquer it, but to honor it. Yet the more the walls seem to sing, the more their silence deepens, because Knossos is not only color, it is also design. A palace woven with corridors and hidden thresholds, with sealed storerooms and passages that turn quietly away. The painted rooms feel open to the sea, yet the building itself feels fortified by complexity, as if beauty was the face presented to the world, while something else lived deeper inside. Here, the contradiction becomes the heart of the chapter. This culture appears radiant: dolphins, flowers, open courtyards drinking the sky. And yet the palace holds secret of architecture, layered like a mind that wishes to remember and forget at once. There are places where light enters freely, and places where it seems to hesitate. There are chambers where one can breathe, and chambers where breath feels held. Whispers tell us that this is how sacred places survive. They offer wonder to the eyes, while guarding truth behind the veil. Perhaps the walls were not decoration, but protection. Perhaps beauty was laid over something that should not be named. And if that is so, then each painted figure is more than art. It is a promise, a gentle disguise, a quiet vow: look here, and do not look deeper. In forgotten corners of the earth, rituals often move through such disguises. They carry meaning without exposing it. They veil what is too powerful to speak plainly. So we imagine the palace at night. Not bright, not crowded, only the soft procession of torchlight, slow as breath, moving across stone. Offerings are carried in silence: oil, grain, honey, held as carefully as prayers. Hands are stained with saffron and incense, the way dawn stains the edge of the sea. Footsteps pass through courtyards where stars hang above like watching eyes. Some believe there were moonlit ceremonies here, where voices did not rise, only drift, where gestures mattered more than words, where the divine was not a distant ruler, but a presence woven into daily life, into lilies, into waves, into the spiral that returns again and again like a sacred heartbeat. And yet, even as we imagine, we must remain gentle with uncertainty. So little survives: a fragment of plaster, a curve of horn, a glimpse of blue. History is a cracked vessel. We pour our longing into it, and we call what spills out truth. We mistake survival for certainty. We take what remains and ask it to speak, forgetting that ruins are not obligated to explain themselves. The painted figures endure, yes, but they endure in the way stars endure, distant, shimmering, refusing to come close enough to be named. And now, as the candlelight grows softer, we return to the first figure again, the dancer, the priestess, the horn, seen through veil and dust. She does not move. She does not answer. She simply remains. Beneath the silence, the wall listens. It is said that meaning is not always something we can retrieve. Sometimes meaning is something that waits inside stone, patient and untouched, until the listener becomes quiet enough to hear the echo without demanding words. And so we end as gently as we began, without conclusion, without certainty. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Tonight, in the sacred hush of Knossos, the painted walls keep their quiet promise, holding their secrets close, and letting us drift towards sleep with wonder still unbroken. It is said that the deepest places do not announce themselves. They simply wait beneath the silence until a wandering mind grows quiet enough to notice the door. Marked by the moon, we stand again at Knossos, where stone is pale and the air tastes faintly of salt and dust. Above us, the open courtyards still drink the sky. But tonight, we do not linger in the light. Tonight, we listen for what lies below. And then we hear it. Footsteps that do not echo. Not because the hall is soft, not because the night is kind, but because the palace seems to swallow sound, absorbing it as though it has been trained, over centuries, to keep every visitor's presence from lingering too long. Whispers tell us that the first step into the labyrinth is not a turn, it is a descent. The opening image comes like a slow, inward spiral, stone steps curling downward, worn smooth by time, damp with cool breath from beneath the earth. It feels like a thought sinking towards sleep, gentle, inevitable, and strangely intimate. Here where memory fades, a question rises, barely louder than a sigh. Was the labyrinth built for keeping something in, or keeping something out? We move down unhurried. The air changes. It thickens with hush. The warmth of the courtyard disappears behind us, and the palace becomes something else. Not a place for gathering, but a place for holding. The walls narrow. Doorways tighten like gates. The ceiling lowers, as though inviting the head to bow. And with every step, the world above grows more distant, like daylight remembered from far away. Some believe that a building can carry emotion. Knossos does. Its architecture does not merely guide the body. It guides the feeling. It folds you inward. Corridors branch like sleeping thoughts. Angles soften, then sharpen again. Rooms appear where you expected walls, and walls appear where you expected passage. A corner becomes another corridor, and another corridor becomes a still chamber. And in that chamber, you sense the quiet pressure of something unspoken. This is not confusion that panics. It is confusion that soothes. A labyrinth does not always chase you. Sometimes it cradles you, like a veil drawn over the eyes, inviting surrender. The palace becomes a living riddle, its design like a mind trying to remember and forget at once. And between these turns, there are thresholds, doorways that feel sacred in their narrowness. A step up, then down, a stone lip worn smooth, like an altar touched by countless hands. Beneath the silence, the air holds scent, clay jars, old grain, traces of oil that once glowed in lamplight. It lingers like a quiet prayer, as if storage itself was ritual here, as if abundance was not merely kept, but consecrated. In forgotten corners of the earth, what is hidden is often what is most precious. We pass shadowed storerooms that feel like sealed mouths. Tall jars, pithoi, rise in the imagination like patient guardians, their bellies once full of honey, wheat, and sacred reserves. Dust gathers on their rims like pale wreaths. Their presence is immense, yet humble. They are proof of civilization that understood time, not as dates, but as seasons, as the slow turning of need and plenty. And then, deeper still, the palace offers a contradiction so gentle you almost miss it. Above, Knossos is open to sky. Below, it is a master of concealment. The same place that welcomes starlight into courtyards is also skilled at sealing secrets into stone. It is as if the building breathes in public, but holds its breath in private. Some believe this is the true nature of sacred space, to show enough to invite reverence, and to hide enough to protect what cannot be carried safely into daylight. We begin to sense that the labyrinth is not only passageways, it is intention. Whispers tell us of hidden records, small things, fragile things. Clay tablets pressed with symbols, while still wet. Seals that marked ownership, offerings, authority. A library not of books, but of impressions, tiny echoes captured in clay. And yet, we remember something else, softly, without bitterness. Fire is patient too. Fire can erase a lifetime in a single night. It can harden tablets by accident and destroy everything around them. It can swallow a whole archive and leave no ash that speaks. Where memory fades, history becomes a thin cloth. We touch it carefully. We do not tug. So we move through these underground hushes, as though moving through a temple built for silence itself. The chambers begin to feel less like rooms and more like pauses, like the spaces between words. One narrow passage opens into a wider chamber, and for a moment, you feel the urge to whisper, though to whom, you cannot say. The stone does not answer. It only listens. And perhaps that is the point. A labyrinth does not reveal. It receives. It takes the footstep, the breath, the question, and holds them until they become part of its own stillness. At last, we begin a slow return upward. Not quickly, not triumphantly, as if we have found something. We rise the way one rises from a dream, carrying a feeling rather than a fact. The courtyards return, and the sky returns, and the wind among the olive trees returns like a familiar hymn. But the descent has changed us. The labyrinth is no longer a monster's house. It is no longer a story meant to be solved. It is a mood, ancient, oceanic, veiled. A place where the mind learns how many ways there are to be lost gently, and how sacred it can feel to not demand a clear map. And as we stand again beneath the open sky, we feel a final hush settle over the stones, soft as dust, soft as starlight. Perhaps some passages were never meant to lead anywhere. Perhaps they were built only to lead inward, deeper into wonder, until the world becomes quiet enough for sleep. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that stories are born the way embers are born, from something once burning, carried gently from hand to hand, until the flame becomes a glow, and the glow becomes warmth, and the warmth becomes a habit. Tonight, we begin not in a ruin, but in a storyteller's chamber. Lamplight trembles against stone. Soft smoke rises, slow as a blessing. The air is warm with quiet breath, and the voice that meets us feels old, older than the room itself, passed from mouth to mouth like warm bread, shared in the dark so fear can soften into wonder. Beneath the silence, the familiar outline arrives like a well-worn cloak. Minos, tribute, Theseus, the thread. We have heard it so many times it almost rocks us toward sleep. Its shape's so steady, its turns so expected, and yet, marked by the moon, a question slips through the weave, gentle, unsettling, and strangely tender. What if the most famous version is the one built to cover the older truth? Some believe that the past is a clear mirror, but the past is more often a veil, layered, repaired, embroidered by many hands. A story can become a shelter, not only for listeners, but for the wounds it tries to hide. So we touch the myth the way one touches relics laid on velvet, slowly, reverently, without gripping too hard. We see the palace again in our mind, Knossos, crumbled and star-marked, oceanic in its distance, and within it, the shape that later ages named a labyrinth, a place of turning corridors and swallowed sound. But the storyteller's voice does not rush us toward a monster. It invites us to look at what a monster means. The bull-headed shadow is not presented as spectacle. It is presented as symbol. Hunger, power, fear dressed in ritual skin. In forgotten corners of the earth, the sacred and the terrifying have always shared a doorway. Masks have always been worn to carry what cannot be spoken plainly. A creature with a human body and a bull's head is not only a threat, it is a question carved into flesh. Where does authority end, and where does appetite begin? And then, softly, the thread appears. Ariadne's thread, so often treated as a simple tool, becomes, in this chamber, something else entirely. Sacred fiber spun from moonlight and longing. A strand that promises escape, yet binds hearts to loss. It is said that every thread carries two directions at once, towards safety, and away from what you once called home. The thread glows in the imagination like pale starlight. It feels delicate, yet holds an entire fate. And as the story moves forward, Theseus descending, the corridors folding, another truth begins to shimmer beneath the surface. Myths rise where history grows thin, where memory fades. The mind fills gaps with shapes it can carry. It makes a single figure to hold many shadows. It makes a monster so it can point to something, instead of admitting it does not know. And so we drift into the space between story and stone, the place where a contradiction becomes a doorway. Some believe the labyrinth was never a prison at all, but a palace misunderstood. Its many rooms and thresholds not meant to confuse intruders, but to serve life, ritual, storage, ceremony, seasons. A place open to sky and its courtyards, yet sealed in its deeper chambers. A place that breathed and withheld, like a mind protecting its own secrets. And what of the bull? Whispers tell us that on Crete, the bull was more than an animal. It was sacred motion. It was wealth. It was ritual. It was a power that could be honored and feared in the same breath. On painted walls, figures leapt over bulls not as conquest, but as devotion. An oath made to the gods of movement, an offering of courage. But outsiders do not always understand devotion. They see ritual and call it madness. They see masks and call them monsters. They see sacred authority and call it cruelty. And so, perhaps, the Minotaur was born, not from stone corridors alone, but from misunderstanding layered over time. Deep beneath the version most often told, another possibility stirs, implied, veiled, forbidden. Perhaps the Minotaur was never a beast. Perhaps it was a role. A hidden prisoner, kept for reasons too complex to sing in public. A sacred mask worn in darkness, during rites that demanded secrecy. A symbol of royal power, half human, half divine claim, used to terrify rivals, to preserve obedience, to turn rumor into control. It is said that rulers do not only build walls, they build narratives. A monster in a labyrinth is useful. It turns a political truth into a bedtime shape. It gives a city a reason to pay tribute. It makes fear portable, repeatable, easy to pass from mouth to mouth. And yet, in the same breath, the story offers tenderness. Because even if the Minotaur was a mask or a prisoner, or a symbol of hunger wearing sacred skin, something still lived in that darkness. Something still waited in the corridors. Something still breathed beneath the silence. And Ariadne, often reduced to a footnote, remains the quiet heart of the myth. Her thread is not only a tool. It is compassion made visible. It is a decision to guide someone out of confusion, even when the cost is her own loneliness. The chamber grows quieter now. The lamp burns lower. The storyteller's voice slows, as though placing a hand gently over the listener's eyes. We know how the famous version ends. Theseus escapes. The monster falls. The thread leads out. And yet, the tenderness lingers like incense. Ariadne left behind, the sea widening between promise and reality, the palace returning to silence as though nothing was ever solved at all. The version most often told remains, because it is easy to hold. It fits neatly in the mind, like a smooth stone warmed by many hands. It gives the past a clear shadow and a clear hero. It lets us sleep believing the labyrinth can be conquered. But beneath that comfort, another question waits, soft, haunting, and unresolved. Who benefits when the past is simplified into a single shadow? Perhaps it was never meant to be answered. Perhaps some stories are not maps, but veils, and some truths only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that the smallest things are sometimes the most sacred, not the towering pillars, not the loud names, but the quiet object held between fingertips, thin as moonlight, pale as breath. Beneath the silence, we begin with thread. Not a rope, not a chain. Only fiber, almost weightless, unspooling in the dark. Imagine it. A hand moving slowly, the way one might unwind a worry before sleep. The air is cool. The room is dim. The world beyond the walls has gone quiet. And yet this single strand seems to carry a soft radiance, as though it remembers the sun even when the sun is gone. Marked by the moon, a question arrives like a sigh. What is a thread, if not a promise made to the lost? Some believe the labyrinth belongs to the hero who entered it. But whispers tell us the labyrinth belongs to the one who understood it. Ariadne, not as a footnote to courage, not as an accessory to glory, but as the quiet heart of the story, beating beneath its louder footsteps. We do not need to see her face. We do not need to hear her voice. In a bedtime tale, what matters is the feeling she leaves behind, the presence of someone who knows that escape is not only a path, but a responsibility. The palace of Knossos rises around us again, vast, veiled, oceanic. Its corridors are still turning thoughts. Its courtyards still drink the sky. Its thresholds still narrow like gates, inviting the body to bow. And within this grand chamber of choices, the thread becomes our guide, soft, patient, unhurried. It does not yank. It does not command. It simply continues. The thread moves across stone like a gentle line of starlight. It touches corners and returns. It disappears for a moment behind a broken pillar, then reappears again, faithful as breath. It is not only an object, it is a rhythm. It teaches the listener how to move without panic, how to trust the next step. And slowly, the symbolism deepens. A thread is memory. It is the fragile line that holds one moment to the next. The way a name can be carried through generations. The way a lullaby survives even when the singer is gone. In forgotten corners of the earth, people have always trusted thread, because thread is continuity made visible. A thread is lineage. It comes from a loom, from hands that learned patience, from women who turned wool into warmth, and then turned warmth into home. Weaving is not merely craft. It is ritual. It is daily devotion. A loom is an altar of ordinary life, where each crossing strand becomes a quiet vow. I will keep the world together, one small line at a time. Some believe that in ancient palaces, the true power was not always in thrones. It was in the keepers of knowledge, in the ones who remembered the pattern. Ariadne's thread feels like it belongs to that older world, a world where women kept continuity in their hands, where stories were knotted into cloth, where sacred meaning lived in domestic rhythm as much as in grand ceremony. And yet, there is a contradiction at the heart of her. She holds the key, yet history often leaves her in shadow. The thread is remembered, her name is repeated, but her inner life becomes mist. Where memory fades, the mind begins to wonder, why do some figures become legends, while others become supporting silence? Who decides which voice becomes stone, and which becomes dust? Whispers tell us that the thread may be older than Ariadne's story, that it may echo practices far more ancient than the version most often told. Cords tied in ceremonies, soft knots sealing vows beneath torchlight, fibers laid across sacred paths through temple spaces, marking where to step, where to pause, where to bow. Threads wound around offerings, binding intention to object. In such rituals, thread is not utility, it is language, spoken by the hands. Perhaps Ariadne did not invent the thread. Perhaps she inherited it, like a prayer passed down in silence. Perhaps the palace itself had long known the power of a line that leads both inward and out, a line that can guide you through confusion without tearing the mystery apart, a line that honors the labyrinth even while escaping it. And as we drift deeper into the chapter, we sense the turning point approaching, not with fanfare, but with soft inevitability. The thread leads out. It promises the shape of return. It offers a way back through shadowed corridors, a gentle refusal to be swallowed by stone. But the thread does not only lead outward, it also leads away, away from home, away from certainty, away from the old world of Knossos, its courtyards and frescoes and sacred hush, into the salt air of exile. It is said that every escape is also a leaving. Every rescue carries a cost. The strand that saves can also sever. And so the ending arrives as a hush, not a conclusion. The palace remains behind us, veiled and star-marked, listening. The sea waits beyond, dark and open, breathing in slow tides. Somewhere a ship's wooden ribs creak softly in the imagination, and the night wind tastes of distance. Even the surest guide cannot guarantee a gentle ending. Ariadne's thread trembles in the mind like starlight caught on a fingertip. Beautiful, fragile, unforgettable. A line that promised safety and delivered change. A line that held one's soul through darkness, yet could not hold every heart together. Perhaps it was never meant to. Perhaps it was only meant to remind us, quietly, tenderly, that the way out of a labyrinth is not always the way back to who we were. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And tonight, as sleep approaches, the thread remains. Thin, pale, almost weightless. Still unspooling, still guiding, still turning gently through the dark. It is said that the smallest relics can carry the heaviest silence. Not the fallen pillars, not the broken walls, but the object that fits in the palm, cool, patient, and sealed. Marked by the moon, we begin with a single stone. A seal stone, smooth as moonlit river rock. It rests against the skin like something half asleep. Its surface is carved with a creature that is half real, half dream. Perhaps a wing, perhaps a horn, perhaps a spiral curling into itself like a whispered vow. Dust clings to its edges. Time has softened its sharpness, but not its intention. Beneath the silence, we turn it slowly between our fingers, and the question arrives, quiet, compelling, impossible to ignore. What did they record, and what did they hide? Whispers tell us there were chambers in Knossos where names were not spoken aloud, where certain things were handled carefully, the way one handles incense or flame, not because they were dangerous in the ordinary sense, but because they belong to a world of authority, of ritual, of sacred order. In such spaces, the spoken word could feel too exposed, too loose, too easy to carry away. So they pressed their meanings into clay instead. We drift inward, as though entering a dim archive. The air is cool. The stone floors hold the memory of countless footsteps. Yet tonight those footsteps do not echo. Here, where memory fades, even sound feels reluctant, as if the palace itself prefers that some things remain unannounced. In the chamber, tablets lie stacked like sleeping birds. Some are broken, some are whole, some are only fragments, edges and corners, as if the rest has slipped quietly into the sea. And on them marks, not letters in the way we know letters, not language that offers itself easily, but signs pressed into wet clay, small impressions that hardened when fire came through the palace, sealing what was once soft into something that could endure. It is said that destruction can preserve what life forgets, and yet, these surviving signs do not open like doors. They open like mist, visible, present, but unwilling to be grasped. Some believe the lines resemble footsteps, tiny tracks across the surface of earth. Others see wings, waves, the curve of a shell, the sharp turn of a horn. Each mark feels like a breath that never became a word. There is something sacred about unreadable text, because it reminds us that meaning can exist without our permission, that a civilization can speak and still refuse to be fully heard, that the past is not obligated to translate itself for the present. We move slowly through the chamber, as though our attention is a lantern. The seal stone in the palm feels heavier now, not from weight, but from implication. These seals were not decoration. They were authority made tangible. An impression pressed into clay could close a jar, secure a storeroom, mark a transaction, bind an offering to its purpose. It was administration, yes, but in a world like Knossos, even administration could become ritual. A seal is a small gate. It says this belongs. It says this is counted. It says this is watched. And behind these careful marks, life continues in quiet imagination. Grain measured out in seasons, oil stored like liquid sunlight, honey sealed away, golden and thick, for nights when the sea winds turned cold. The ordinary things, daily devotion, survival, continuity, may be written here, pressed into clay by hands that never expected strangers to read them thousands of years later. Yet the deeper we drift, the more contradiction rises. This civilization could keep records with precision, could name and number and seal, yet it remains distant, veiled, refusing translation in full. It offers evidence, but not voice. It gives us footprints without the traveler, wings without the bird, waves without the sea. And so the question deepens gently. If they could record so carefully, why does their language still slip away? Whispers tell us that what endures is not always what was most important, only what was most lucky. Fire hardened clay, yes, but fire also erased wood, cloth, papyrus, and everything that could have held fuller songs. A whole library can vanish without leaving a single sentence behind, and we are left with the bones of meaning, starlight without the constellation's name. Some believe that within these symbols might rest forbidden knowledge, not forbidden because it is wicked, but because it was sacred, private, a power that belonged only to the initiated. Names of gods spoken only at certain hours, routes of ships traced like secret veins across the sea, lists of tribute that reveal the quiet weight of empire, notes of fear, storms, shortages, tremors in the earth, pressed into clay when the air felt uncertain. Perhaps in these tablets, the labyrinth is not only stone corridors. Perhaps the labyrinth is language itself, turning, veiled, leading inward but never quite out. We do not rush. Each sign is a breath. Each unknown sound is a doorway that remains half closed. We let the mind drift, the way it drifts before sleep, accepting that not everything is meant to resolve. Where memory fades, longing remains. Longing to hear the true names of things. Longing to know what was counted, what was treasured, what was feared. Longing to stand inside a moment that has already passed and ask it softly to speak again. But the chamber stays quiet. The seal stone still rests in the palm, cool and patient. Its carved creature half real, half dream, stares without expression. And we understand, with a strange tenderness, that the seal is not a key. It is a reminder that the past can be present without being open. The seals still exist, but they do not open. They hold their silence the way dust holds moonlight, softly, without effort, without apology. The most intimate truths of Knossos remain locked behind a script of starlight, beautiful, distant, and sacred in its refusal. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And tonight, as sleep approaches, we hold a small stone and let its silence wash over us, like waves in the dark, like breath in a forgotten chamber, until even our questions become quiet. It is said that ash is a kind of memory, not the memory that speaks in clear sentences, but the memory that settles softly, without argument, over everything that once mattered. Marked by the moon, we enter Knossos again, but not as it was in bright fresco color, not as it was in stories that shimmer with heroes and monsters. We enter after fire. A shaft of light falls through a broken opening above, pale and patient, like dawn remembering how to arrive. And within that light, ash drifts downward, slow as snowfall, each grain turning gently in the air as if deciding where to rest. Beneath the silence, the palace is quiet in a different way now. Walls stand without their voices. Jars lie broken, their clay bellies cracked open like emptied prayers. The smell of smoke is long gone, yet we imagine it anyway, because the mind can taste what the air no longer holds. And the opening question comes, tender and heavy, like a hand placed over the heart. When a place burns, what survives besides the shape of loss? Some believe destruction is loud, but the deeper truth is often softer. Fire passes, and afterward there is only stillness, an absence that does not shout, but changes everything it touches. We walk slowly through the ruin, not searching for drama, only listening for echoes. In forgotten corners of the earth, the end of an age rarely announces itself with a single trumpet blast. It arrives in shifts, small fractures, quiet withdrawals, the slow loosening of a world's familiar weave. The Minoan world, once oceanic and bright, began to thin, not in one instant, but in moments that history can only glimpse. Earthquakes, old companions of islands, made stones shudder beneath courtyards open to sky. Pillars tilted, stairways cracked, rooms collapsed as though the palace itself had exhaled too hard. The island's bones moved, and the people rebuilt what they could, again and again, as if repair were a form of faith. Whispers tell us that they adapted. A wall raised here, a doorway narrowed there, a storeroom sealed, a courtyard changed, and still, the sea continued its patient rhythm. Some believe the sea is only background, but the sea is a living archive. It carries trade, weather, rumor, and the quiet turning of power. It changes its mood without warning. Calm one season, wild the next, and a civilization that lives by it must learn to listen. Knossos listened, and for a time it endured. Yet there were other murmurs on the horizon, distant thunder that does not strike immediately, but makes the air feel different. Outsiders arriving like shadows at the edge of the known world. Shifts in trade, shifts in control. We do not accuse. We do not declare. We simply acknowledge what the ruins suggest, that the center did not hold forever. Where memory fades, we see only fragments of cause and consequence. A collapsed room, a rebuilt corridor, a layer of ash, a layer of silence. History here is sediment, softly stacked, each layer pressing down on the one beneath it. The palace became not a single moment, but many moments, some bright, some fractured, some merely endured. And in this layering, a sacred atmosphere emerges. Ruins become temples of absence. Every fallen pillar becomes a prayer for what was. Every broken threshold becomes a question that can no longer be answered. The empty courtyards, once filled with footsteps and offerings, now hold only wind, and the faint scrape of dust moving like slow breath across stone. The contradiction is almost unbearable in its gentleness. A civilization that loved open courtyards and sea breath, and yet could not outrun fate's quiet turning. It is said that the world does not always end by being taken. Sometimes it ends by being left. Left behind by trade routes that shift. Left behind by languages that change. Left behind by new powers rising like tides. And still, amid the ash, there is something strange, something almost tender. Fire does not only destroy. Fire also preserves, by accident. In the heat of catastrophe, clay tablets hardened. Soft impressions became permanent. Secrets, pressed into wet clay by hands that never expected strangers to read them, were sealed into durability. Implied forbidden knowledge rests in these hardened fragments. Numbers that once mattered. Names that were once spoken softly in chambers of authority. Lists of offerings, perhaps. Routes of ships. Tributes. Inventories. Notes that might have carried fear, or preparedness, or prayer. Yet even these gifts are incomplete. Like dreams remembered in fragments. A line of symbols with no sound. A seal impression with no voice behind it. An archive that survived only in pieces, as if the palace itself chose what to keep and what to hide. Beneath the silence, we realize that survival is not the same as explanation. The palace remains. Yes, stone endures, but the people are gone. Their laughter does not return. Their rituals do not continue in the courtyards. Their names, so carefully pressed into clay, so delicately sealed, hover beyond our reach. We can hold the artifacts, trace the spiral marks, stare into the painted fragments, but the living warmth that once moved through these corridors has slipped away like breath at dawn. And so the chapter moves toward its closing not with certainty, but with a melancholy stillness. The ash continues to drift in the shaft of light, slow as snowfall, and we begin to understand something gentle and unavoidable. Endings in history are rarely loud. Often they arrive like ash, soft, settling, unavoidable. Perhaps it was never meant to be fully known. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And tonight, as sleep approaches, we do not force the ruin to speak. We sit with it in reverence. We let the dust and starlight and silence become their own kind of story, one that does not conclude, but fades softly into the hush where dreams begin. It is said that the sea is never truly empty. Even when no sails are visible, even when the shoreline is still, the water is carrying something. Old light, old names, old departures, moving them quietly beneath its surface. Marked by the moon, we open this chapter at dusk. The shoreline is a long, soft line of sand and stone, colored in sand beige and fading copper as the sun falls away. Waves fold into themselves, one after another, each crest a slow exhale. The sea does not crash. It breathes. It repeats. It forgets and remembers in the same motion. Beneath the silence, you stand as sea gate, an ancient threshold of worn rock and broken steps leading down into the water. It feels like a doorway that opens onto nowhere and everywhere at once. And as the first stars appear, you begin to see them, not with the eyes, but with the mind. Ships, slender vessels departing from Crete under starlight, their hulls dark as shadow, their oars dipping in patient rhythm. There's no cheering, no farewell that lingers, only the hush of departure, as if the sea itself asks for quiet when a journey begins. And the opening question rises, both simple and vast. How far does a civilization travel before it becomes a rumor? Whispers tell us that Knossos was never only stone and corridors. It was also a pulse connected to the sea. A palace that breathed through courtyards open to sky, yes, but also a heart that depended on water routes, on distant harbors, on vessels carrying the island's life outward like threads across the Aegean. So the chapter drifts outward. We leave the courtyards behind. We leave the painted walls and storerooms and spiral thresholds. We follow the trade routes as if tracing constellations on water, lines that exist only because enough people believed in them, enough ships returned often enough promises were kept across distance. The sea becomes our chamber now, vast, oceanic, sacred. Some believe the sea is merely a road, but the sea is a living archive. It keeps and erases in the same breath. It holds wrecks and releases driftwood. It carries offerings and swallows them. It is a moving library written in waves, and every page is rewritten before it can be read. And yet, the Minoans place their trust in it. We imagine the cargo not as commerce, but as ritual. Amphorae, clay vessels shaped like steady hearts, sealed with stoppers, marked with impressions, filled with oil that once tasted of sun. Shells gathered and polished, carried as charms. Obsidian, black as night glass, sharp and sacred, taken from volcanic earth. Ivory, pale and luminous, as if carved from moonlight. Each object becomes a kind of offering between worlds, exchanged not only for wealth, but for connection. In forgotten corners of the earth, trade is never only trade. It is diplomacy. It is survival. It is story. And when we follow these routes, we find fragments of the Minoans scattered across the sea like soft echoes. A motif on pottery here, a seal impression there, a pattern of spirals and lilies appearing in distant places, evidence that Crete's influence traveled far beyond its shores. Yet their voice remains faint. This is the mystery and contradiction at the heart of the chapter. They appear everywhere in fragments, but their true words do not follow. Their script remains veiled. Their names remain partial. We see the shape of their reach, but not the sound of their inner life. It is as if the sea carried their objects outward, yet kept their language close, hidden behind a horizon no one could cross. Beneath the silence, we feel the sea's quiet authority, because the sea does not promise return. Some journeys come back with new cargo and new stories, yes, but others slip away. A ship can leave under clear stars and never arrive. It can vanish into fog, into storm, into the blank spaces where maps become guesswork, and the sea will not explain itself. Deep exploration brings the shadow beyond the horizon, not as catastrophe, but as a slow turning of fate. Storms, sea quakes, the subtle shifting of coastlines, and far away, the great dark possibility, Thera Saturni, its volcanic breath rising, its ash drifting, its waves moving outward across the Aegean like a quiet command. We do not make the sea roar in this chapter. We keep it meditative, because the truth is that disaster does not always feel loud from within history. Often it is recognized only afterward, when patterns change and returns become fewer, when a harbor feels emptier, when the horizon stops bringing familiar sails. Whispers tell us the sea knows more than stone. Stone remembers where pillars fell. Stone holds the outline of courtyards and corridors, but the sea holds what never returned. It swallowed ships, stories, names, entire lifetimes folded into deep water, leaving only scattered tokens on foreign shores. A broken amphora far away, a seal stone found in a distant market, a shard of pottery with a dolphin painted in faded blue. Small proofs that something once traveled and did not come back. Implied forbidden knowledge rests in that thought, that the sea is not only a path, but a keeper, that the greatest archives may be underwater, beyond reach, guarded by pressure, darkness, and time. And still, the sea continues. It repeats its slow exhale against the shore. It folds wave into wave, like breath into breath. It offers no apology and no explanation. It simply moves. As we approach the end, we return to the sea gate again, standing where stone meets water, where land admits it cannot follow. The horizon is a veil, a thin line where sky and sea touch, and beyond it, all certainty dissolves. The listener is left with calm wonder, imagining oars dipping in moonlit rhythm, imagining sails slipping into mist, imagining the quiet truth that some journeys end without witnesses. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And tonight, as sleep approaches, we let the sea keep its secrets. We let the ships depart in the mind's gentle dark, becoming part of the water's endless, sacred forgetting, until even the question fades into the sound of waves breathing softly at the gate. It is said that some creatures stand at the edge of language. We can describe their shape, their strength, the sound of their breath, but we cannot easily name what they mean. Marked by the moon, we begin in a courtyard washed with pale light. The stones are cool. The air is still, as if the palace is holding its breath. Above, the sky is a deep dusk blue, scattered with faint stars that seem to watch without blinking. And in the center of this quiet court, a bull stands, not as a monster, not as a spectacle, but as presence. Its breath is visible in the cool night, rising in slow clouds like incense. Hooves are patient on worn stone. The animal's eyes catch starlight, and in that reflection there is something ancient, something that feels older than fear. Beneath the silence, an opening question rises softly. The way smoke rises from a brazier. Why did they honor the bull with such devotion, and what did it cost them? Whispers tell us that in the Minoan world, the bull was more than muscle and horn. It was sacred motion. It was wealth. It was the living symbol of power that could nourish and destroy in the same breath. To live close to such a creature was to live close to a force that did not ask permission. And so, the courtyard becomes a ceremonial chamber, not in loud celebration, but in quiet readiness. We do not see crowds in this bedtime vision. We only feel the impression of gathering, the faint echo of many feet, the soft smolder of torches against stone, the hush that forms when something holy is about to begin. This chapter is a slow descent into ritual, bull leaping, a practice remembered in painted walls and fragments of myth, a dance between fear and beauty, where the body approaches danger not with hatred, but with devotion. In forgotten corners of the earth, people have always sought ways to meet the wild and not be consumed by it. They have always invented ceremonies to stand beside the edge and call it sacred. Imagine it gently, without sharpness. Bare stone underfoot, cool as river rock. The scent of oil and smoke. The bull's warm breath close enough to feel. A moment of stillness so deep that even the torch flames seem to quiet. Then movement. Bodies, only suggested, like shadows passing through light. Moving in arcs as if following a hidden constellation. Hands reaching toward horns, not to conquer, but to touch the boundary between human and divine. The leap itself becomes a prayer, a moment of suspension where gravity is negotiated, where fear becomes focus, where the air holds a breath and refuses to release it. It is said that the most sacred moments are the ones that cannot last. A leap ends. A landing arrives. Applause, if there was applause, fades into dream, and the bull remains. The ritual leaves traces, not in noise, but in symbols. On the palace walls, horns appear again and again, curving like crescents, repeated like a vow. Spirals coil like inner tides. The bull's form becomes a language that doesn't translate easily into words, because it isn't only about the animal. It is about what the animal represents. Power without explanation. Beauty that can wound. Life that demands respect. Yet, as we linger in this sacred court, contradiction begins to breathe. The bull is celebrated in art and ritual, and yet in later ages, it becomes the seed of terror. Some believe this is how myths are born, not from lies, but from misreadings. Outsiders arrive long after the ceremonies have quieted. They find ruins, fragments, painted horns, and leaping forms. They hear whispers of the bull's importance. They sense the palace's complexity, its corridors, its sealed stores, its private chambers behind veils, and their minds begin to fill what history cannot fully explain. A sacred rite becomes captivity. Devotion becomes hunger. The bull becomes a monster, and thus the Minotaur is shaped, bull-headed shadow in a labyrinth, portable fear, easy to tell, easy to remember. But beneath the silence, another possibility lingers, implied and veiled. What if the ritual carried more than beauty? What if it carried cost? Implied forbidden knowledge hovers here, not as gore, not as spectacle, but as a quiet, unsettling thought, the possibility of sacrifice, blood offered to keep order, ceremonies performed behind veils, where the sacred demanded something in return. We do not declare this as fact. We only wonder, because the past is not a courtroom. It is a temple of fragments, and fragments do not testify. They suggest. Perhaps the devotion to the bull was purely reverence, an honoring of strength and fertility, a celebration of motion and life. Or perhaps, like many ancient devotions, it was entwined with fear. Fear of drought, fear of tremors in the earth, fear of storms at sea, Fear that the gods might withdraw their favor if the proper gifts were not laid down. Where memory fades, we are left with the hush before the leap, the most honest moment of all, a moment where the body is still, the bull is still, the night is still, and in that stillness, the listener feels what the ritual truly held: intimacy, the warmth of animal breath, the cool stone under bare feet, the quiet awareness that beauty and danger can be the same doorway. As the chapter approaches its ending, the courtyard begins to empty in the mind's eye. The torches are fewer, the echoes soften, the palace returns to its long, listening silence. The moon remains, and the bull's presence lingers, not as an answer, but as a question that cannot be translated. It stands there, patient, eyes reflecting starlight, as though it has always stood there, beneath every version of the story, beneath every later myth. Perhaps it was never meant to be fully understood. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And tonight, as sleep approaches, we let the bull remain what it was in that moonlit court: sacred ambiguity, beauty and danger entwined, a living symbol standing quietly at the edge of our knowing, until the last breath of the palace fades into the dark. It is said that silence has many ages. There is the silence of a room after a candle goes out. There is the silence of a shoreline when the tide pulls away. And there's the silence that gathers around ruins at night. A silence so old it feels like a presence rather than an absence. Marked by the moon, we arrive at Knossos one last time, not in a bright hour of day, when stone looks like stone and history feels like a museum label. We arrive when the world sleeps, when modern noise folds itself gently into ancient quiet. Night air rests on the skin. A slow heartbeat becomes the loudest sound you can name. The first image is not spectacle. It is stillness. Stone warmed by the last sun, now cooling beneath stars. Dust on broken thresholds. A courtyard open to sky, receiving the darkness as though it has been waiting for it. And beneath the silence, an inward question rises, not demanding, only wondering. What is the labyrinth, if not the shape of what we cannot fully know? Some believe the labyrinth is a place, a tangle of corridors, a puzzle of walls, a house built to confuse and trap. But as we stand here, with the night settling softly over the ruins, we sense something gentler. The labyrinth is not only architecture, it is the way the mind moves through mystery. Tonight, we gather the threads of what we have seen, without tying them too tight. A corridor that swallowed sound. A fresco where dolphins swam across cracked plaster. A seal stone cool in the palm, carved with a creature half real, half dream. A sea gate where ships departed under starlight. Ash drifting through a shaft of light, slow as snowfall. A bull's breath rising in a moonlit court like incense. Each returns like a dream fragment, tender, incomplete, refusing to become a single clear picture. And slowly, the emotional arc shifts. Not toward certainty, not toward revelation, but toward calm acceptance. Wonder without demand. Where memory fades, the heart learns a softer way of seeing. Knossos was built to be lived in. It was not constructed as a riddle for strangers. It was a home for ritual and storage, for courtyards that needed to breathe, for hands that carried oil and grain and offerings in quiet rhythm. It was a place where walls held color like trapped starlight, where thresholds asked for a bowed head, where the sea was always near in scent and symbol. And yet, time does what time always does. It turns every certainty into a riddle. It is said that when language is lost, imagination rushes in to fill the chamber. When an empty room cannot explain itself, a monster is invented to justify the fear of not knowing. When corridors twist and records remain unreadable, the mind reaches for a story it can carry. Thus the famous shadow appears, bull-headed, hungry, waiting in the deep. But beneath the silence, we understand something quietly important. The monster may have been the story's way of holding what history could not. A shape placed inside the labyrinth, so that confusion would have a face. A single figure to contain the many contradictions of a vanished world, beauty and power, openness and concealment, ritual and fear, devotion and cost. The labyrinth, in that sense, is memory's design. It hides its center, not out of cruelty, but out of the natural way things fade. We lose the names first, then the meanings, then the reasons. What remains are the outlines, stone, pigment, seal impressions, scattered shards, and a listening silence that invites interpretation without surrendering truth. Implied forbidden knowledge settles here, not as a shocking secret, but as a quieter truth. Perhaps the greatest secret is that no single answer will arrive, not for the writing that refuses full translation, not for the ceremonies performed behind veils, not for the ships that did not return, not for the exact turning of fate that brought ash to courtyards. The palace gives us fragments, beautiful, evocative, star-marked, and asks something different of us than certainty. It asks for attention, for reverence, for the willingness to sit beside an unanswered question and let it remain unanswered without forcing it into a convenient shape. Some believe this is the true ritual of history, not conquest of the past, but communion with it. As we linger in the moonlit ruins, we notice how the night changes the stone. Edges soften, distances blur. The palace becomes less a set of rooms and more a mood, oceanic, veiled, slow. The same mist that hides the far walls also protects them, as if the world itself is drawing a curtain so the ruins can rest. And now, gently, we begin to leave. Not quickly, not as if we are escaping, but as if we are stepping out of a temple. Slow steps, soft breath, grateful distance. We pass the thresholds one last time. We let the courtyards keep their sky. We let the corridors keep their hush. We let the painted figures remain in their cracked chambers, listening without speaking. We let the seal stay sealed. We let the sea hold its missing ships. Because tonight, the labyrinth does not need to be solved. It only needs to be carried. Beneath the silence, we feel it. The strange comfort of mystery held gently, like starlight in the mind's dark chamber. The labyrinth remains behind us in stone, yes, but it also remains within. In the way we remember fragments, in the way we sense hidden rooms inside our own thoughts, in the way certain questions linger not as burdens, but as quiet companions. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in full. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as sleep approaches, we carry the labyrinth the way the night carries the stars, without gripping, without explaining, simply allowing it to glow softly, somewhere behind the eyes, until the world becomes quiet enough to dream.